The day of my near-death experience, I was 17 years old, and I was driving back from work with a friend, and we worked at a sandwich shop, and I was supposed to be taking a college entrance prep course that night that I wanted to miss. School wasn't my favorite, so I told him if I got home just a few minutes later, my mom wouldn't make me go. Basically, I'd be too late to get over to do it. So I told him to miss my exit home and go up a couple more miles on the highway and turn around by the time I got home. Wouldn't have to go to class. So he does that. It's starting to rain, and gets off the highway a few miles up, turning around on the highway and getting back on. And he's 16 at the time, and he's speeding up to get back on the highway, and the car starts fishtailing. And I know that he had to have gone to hit the brake, and instead he hit the gas, and he floored it right off the highway. And that's when I remember the running into a chain link fence. And that's when everything slowed down. And three very distinct things went through my head at that very moment. It was, you're going to die. It was just this matter of fact washed over you. You're going to die now. Then it was, I wish I could have said goodbye. And I saw my parents, and I saw my best friend Dave, and he was smiling at me. And then the third one was, but they will understand. And with that came a very ready-made context that they will understand in death, not in life, that you don't understand death in life. And that was just sort of downloaded into you. And in that moment, it was also the sense of you don't grieve really for the living in death, because you knew that you'd be with each other again in the blink of an eye. It was just there to know that in cosmic time, the people were there were with you again in a moment. So you didn't grieve in death the way you do in life. Grieving's for the living, and you felt somewhat bad for them, but just the knowledge of how much of a flash it is didn't allow you to really grieve. And so then I'm out of my body. I always thought I was floating in space. That's how I pictured it, or the sky, like a cloudy sky. And as I'm up there, it's just enveloped in absolute warmth and bliss and perfection. I mean, there's really no way to describe it. I've always tried to, even recreate that in my life, through, various times. And there's just nothing that can touch what it was. And there was a real, just a glowing white, brilliant light with me, sort of enveloping me. And it was very much a sense that it was a guide or a spirit, and you're just filled with warmth. And there's no way to describe it. There was no fear of death. And I knew that the accident was down below. It's almost like you could kind of look, but I didn't want to. And I was just sitting in perfection. And then the next moment, boom, I'm hanging upside down in the car. We'd rolled off into a business parking lot, like down a hill, like rolled several times and like slid on the roof into this business parking lot. And I'm upside down hanging by the seatbelt. And I've got blood in my eyes and glass all over, like stuck into my face, like all these shards. That was like one of the things they did at the hospital, is they were removing all these shards from my face. And I remember seeing like the radiator fluid falling out of the engine, and I was just in peace. I didn't have any urgency to get out of the car. I didn't want to get out of the car. I really wanted to be back where I just was. It was, you just in the moment before, you had been in the perfection of all of the divine of the universe, and now you're back in your body and you're cut to shit, and you didn't want to be there. And so I didn't make any move to get out. I remember my buddy wasn't able to get down and climb out. My side of the car was more crunched, and the paramedics had to get in through the back window and sort of pull me down and out, and went to the hospital. I got back from the hospital later. I was with my parents, and I was just still sort of in this, I mean, you could easily say it was just shock, but it wasn't. It was very like stuck in that moment. I mean, here I am, that was at 17, and I'm in my 40s now. And those three things have always just been completely ingrained in my brain. I've tried to write about them. I mean, I'm a writer. So I've naturally like really tried to incorporate them several times in writings, just like you're going to die. I wish I could have said goodbye, but they'll understand. Subtext. They'll understand death, not in life. No one understands death in life, and that life is the blink of an eye, and then you're back together, and there's nothing ever to fear. Like, that was impressed upon me, has never left, and sort of changed my entire life after that day. I mean, I got back from the hospital and I was just sort of emotionless, just still like, what am I doing here? I took a shower and I remember breaking down in the shower and just to my knees, like straight out of a movie, just sobbing, just overwhelmed with energy, just totally sobbing. And then the next day, I just woke up with energy. There's no other way to describe it. From like that day on, there was an energy in my body, a very like physical, real energy that could flow up and down. And years later, you know, I'd sort of, through spiritual healing, someone would be like, that was a Kundalini awakening that happened, which is like a yogi practice, but apparently happens sometimes during near-death experiences. And sort of all of a sudden, I was a 17-year-old kid with like buzzing energy running up and down. And I very much wasn't from a family that would have known what to do with that, or, you know, it was from a Catholic family and would have been considered odd. And I felt very much like a freak. I was like completely empathic all of a sudden, where I could feel and almost hear what everyone was thinking or about to say. It was overwhelming what you could feel from everybody. And yeah, within like a year, I had left my house. I had left the city I was from. I moved across the country to where no one knew me, because it was after the near-death experience, after you like felt that energy and you came back, there was really no way to just view society as you had. Nothing you were trying to achieve or go, you know, I was about to go into college. I had a family. I was about to do like a finance internship the following year. And suddenly that was just ridiculous. The thought of such a thing was just absolutely nonsense. And so you just you didn't fit in. And then I had this crazy energy within me. And so I took off, I left, and I moved out west and spent, a few years probably hitting rock bottom through various addictions and depression and anxiety. I knew that this was like a spiritual thing within me, but I wasn't prepared for it. And it was a very overwhelming energy. And and it'd be about, 10 years until I started to figure it all out and get my life on track and really do a lot of work from the ground up to really rebuild myself. And, that be through meditation, through diet, through exercise, through figuring out some medical issues I had. It's this motherfucker gene mutation. It's like MTHFR. It's like a gene mutation where you don't process B vitamins. And I had that, and your folate's all messed up. And so I got on a methylated complex vitamin. Suddenly I was energetic, and suddenly I had energy, and suddenly like my body was working. So that was very much an aspect to it. And then I also, started getting very much into plant medicine and psychedelic healing. And, I had done psychedelics in my youth, but never with the intention that, that's required and the discipline for healing. So it was a long journey. I mean, that car accident sort of flipped my life over. I rolled off the highway, and from that day, nothing would ever be the same. I stand here today in my 40s with 2 kids and a wife, and very much put together, and it took a lot of work to get there. But that journey became sort of what you held on to, what was beautiful, and what gives you the purpose every day to, keep rolling and keep teaching and, try to make this world a little bit better place and try to wake people up to sort of the true reality of what we're experiencing here. And so that's the brief or long story, however you want to look at it.
I love it. And Especially, it sounds to me, I think people misunderstand near-death experiences very often, at least people listening to them, because they sort of think you have this experience and then everything's rosy and just awesome. And for you, after your experience, you said you hit rock bottom, you've gone through addiction, so I'm picking up on the fact that you weren't necessarily dealing with addiction before, but by having all this excess energy, not being sure of what you do with it and what you make out of it, it sort of led you down that path. And before you could find your way to healing and to getting your life together, it was a couple of rough years. So could you speak a bit more about how that energy actually led you down that path and how you found the power to pick yourself up from rock bottom?
Yeah, absolutely. So you knew that you knew it's just download. You know that this is a divine power within you. You know that it's like a God energy. You just feel it. You can control it. You can bring it up into your head. You can blow out your third eye and just feel your entire body buzz. There's no way to describe it. Your body's just like, and you feel, you can recreate some of the bliss in that moment. But at the same time, I was a kid, and and I was 17, and just trying to figure out how to talk to girls, and it was overwhelming, this thing that was suddenly happening to you. And so I think I didn't feel like people would understand. I didn't feel like the place I came from would understand, or even my best friends, who I'm still friends with today, and they don't know any of this. None of my best friends back home know this story about me. And I'm like, they're going to find out probably one day, but then we'll have that conversation. They're my best friends, but it's not a crew that you talk about spirituality with and things like this with. They're your boys. They're the ones who give you shit. And so people don't know, but I always felt ostracized, mostly in my own head. And then you're very much feeling everything from everybody. And so I think a lot of the addiction was trying to squash the feelings that you were having, trying to mask them. Maybe a sense that some of it was trying to recreate the feeling of near death. You're a kid, you get the sense, you have this moment where you just sense the divine. You're held in it. It's perfection. You know that everyone's going here. And you come back and you're like, and all this, what we're doing is nonsense here on earth. I mean, not everything, like just, governments, business, corporations, greed, all the, everything that just is propped up in our societies just doesn't matter and is the furthest from what this experience is supposed to be about. So suddenly you're a kid and that's just all downloaded in you, and that's going to screw you up. I mean, you're a kid. You don't have the capacity to handle that. I mean, a lot of adults wouldn't, but at least if an adult, you'd have more time in life. You've already gone through more growth cycles, more stages of life. You have more experience. But as a kid, you're really just still an infant trying to figure out your life, and suddenly this happens to you. And so, yeah, I fell into some cycles of addiction and depression, anxiety, and let's not just say like street drug addiction. There's street drug addiction, and then there's pharmaceuticals, which are, not far from it, and a lot of times worse. It was far harder to get off pharmaceuticals than it was any of the street drugs. I'll say that, like antidepressants, anxiety meds, that stuff is nasty stuff that they don't tell you when you get on it, but you have to taper off for months while your brain zaps and your head shaking, and so it's awful stuff, all of it around. And then I think at one point in my life, I just sort of had this epiphany. I still very much had this energy within me, and this was not the way. I had always had this sort of weird intention of walking the line between light and dark after this, seeing how far I could go with this stuff, knowing that I had the light here to pull me back out. It was very much within me that there was that sense that I had to feel suffering. I had to feel the human condition. But I could never allow myself to give over to it. I always knew that I was able to pull myself back out from what I had experienced and go back to sort of this divine energy, but it was part of my job to understand the low energy and addiction and depression and anxiety. And in a weird sense, that's just how it came across to me. But finally, it was enough. And it all started by one day I just started walking. And I just started getting up at 4:30 in the morning before I'd go to work, and I'd walk for a couple hours. I lived out in California, and I was a couple miles from the beach, and I'd walk down to the beach and back before the sun rose. And it was just so cathartic, and it was really the beginning of healing, just giving your mind this silence to sort of rest in the walk. And you know, and I always meditated, but I really started meditating with more intention of healing, and then finding out the diet thing and the MTHFR gene mutation. And so all these things started to build on each other. And you put in that time and you get away from the drinking or some drugs, and that sort of becomes, it just gets easier over time. You know, and it takes a while. You go through phases. I mean, anyone who's done recovery or for addictions, you know, you hit a 6 months mark and you'll get a bad week where you're just really jonesing for something, or a year. But, you know, over time, it just all becomes more doable, and start to really relish the journey and the path that you're on in being sober and clean. And while I was doing this, it's just this energy that I've been subduing all this time really started coming alive again. And very much like this divine sense of just buzzing at all times. You're buzzing. Your third eye is buzzing with just love and vibration and peace. And then, you know, the final step was plant medicine and psychedelic healing, which, you know, I feel like that was like this last medicine that I took, that sort of brought me back to some wholeness, kind of filled some place in my heart, and sort of connected with the energy of that was released by the near-death experience. Was very, you know, there's similar energies when you've done psychedelics. And I always want to say this, and I want to separate this, because you get a lot of people who don't understand psychedelics, and they act like it's another street drug, when it's the furthest thing from the truth. If you don't know psychedelics, it's an intense experience. You don't want to just go into it blindly. I would never encourage someone to just go into it blindly. You'd want to do it with professionals, and you'd want to do it right. Street drugs you want to do over and over again. Drinking, alcohol, you want to keep drinking. Cigarettes, you want to keep smoking. Anything like that. Psychedelics, you don't want to do them all the time. In fact, you can have one big trip where you learn everything and you don't ever want to do it again. So people conflate the two. I see it in the comments of videos and stuff that I've done, and they're not the same thing. And anyone who says they are just doesn't understand, basically.
So I love that we're defining that, because to be honest, that's not quite my area of expertise. So I love learning more about it, and I'm sure that the audience will. So I find it fascinating to understand, what is the purpose that you would use psychedelics for then?
Well, so for me, it's hard to describe what it does, but it does bring you to the divine. A good hero's dose of magic mushrooms, or an ayahuasca, doing Mother Ayahuasca, a journey on that. I mean, you're really brought to the divine. A DMT in the same way. It's the curtain is lowered more. That's how I could best describe it. I think there's all this stimulus, all these realms going around us at all times. And what these do is they lower the curtain, and you're like, oh, this is reality over here. What we're doing here in life is sort of the dream. And you get very conservative Christians, or Christians in general, and you get all people who are just like, that's the devil, that's evil. And once you've done that, you know it's not, because it's filled with love, and love for everybody, and no war, and fix everything, and take care of animals and the planet. Like, if that's evil, I don't, you know what I mean? I don't want to know God if that's evil, like, because it's not. And you just get so many people who just come from very ego involved. You know, they've been taught their whole life that things are one way, and someone comes along and says, that's not the way. I mean, you do a lot of these stories, and I think a lot of things come across as, it's not the near death. It's not about religion. Once you cross over, it's just about this energy of love. And you know, and so you need to clarify that. You need to teach people that, you know, religion is great. It serves a great function if it makes you a great person and it takes care of your community. And God is great. But God is the universe. It's not some man. It's an omni-power presence energy that's within everything. And you also get people who like to pretend that the near death is all in the mind. But what they don't understand is the mind is just this conduit into matter, into a conscious web that's both a realm here and a realm here. So we're tapping into that. And some near-death experiences go far past that point of staying within the body, and they go more into that realm of consciousness. But it's what's come across to me from my near-death experience and my psychedelic journeys and my meditations and intense meditation work is that that it's all consciousness. It's all subconsciousness. So a near-death experience might start for some people as very like hellish, and I feel like they're tapping into subconscious before they're moving out of that more into a wider conscious net, sort of that envelops all things. I remember coming back from a journey one time, and it was just sort of downloaded into me that dark matter is consciousness, that what the scientists are all trying to figure out, that what makes up the bulk of our universe is actually just an entanglement of consciousness that we're all part of, and that so our minds are very much intended into that. But all animal minds, trees, everything's part of this consciousness, and it's our sort of our job to feed that energy, beauty, and love, and in turn that feeds out into other realms. But everyone's available to feed it whatever they want. So you get people who feed there's the subconscious entanglement of all reality with negative and darkness and bad, and that's both there to take back out, but that's also why some people have very bad psychedelic experiences, because they're sitting in their negative entanglement of consciousness instead of being in this pureness of love and peace. So maybe that's a little confusing, but I've had a very much sense that that everything is just consciousness, and the universe is divine, and our purpose here on Earth very clearly is to take care of animals, man, humankind, nature, and to do our best to raise apes, which is us, to a godlike state. It's a slow, long process. There's a feeling that it can be many lifetimes. I know that freaks a lot of people out, but it goes on and on and on. It's almost like an experiment of the divine to raise, to bring this battling, war-hungry ape to divine. And people are like, well, it's not working. Look at the state of our world. But we're ants. We don't have the ability to see the scope of time. I mean, this universe is 13 billion years old. I mean, we just don't have the ability to process that, and nor should we. And everyone wants to know what reality is and what the end is like. And I can tell you that it's love and bliss, but at the same time, you got to just live your life here, because you have a purpose here. You're here to build and to create beauty and to help your family and your community. And by doing that energy, that slow build of consciousness that goes out into the web of everything, like you're giving power to everything. So like you got to give it the right power instead of the wrong power, basically. Instead of like feeding off of negative media that's just got everyone freaked out and dumping their dopamine and feeling like crap, or violence or whatever. I mean, everything we're propping up, money, just chasing money and greed, like it's all nonsense. You just have to find your passion, do what you love, and that passion hopefully aligns with making your world a better place. Yeah.
I love that. So when you said that the purpose is to raise apes to a godlike state, ironically, that's the second time today I'm hearing this.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Another interview?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
what did they say?
Interesting, because I haven't heard this before. So, I'm
That's
still...
the entanglement of consciousness. Things are rising and moving together in forces. I do. It's a weird concept to think about, but we are just antennas, and we're putting into that. We're also feeding. We're feeding it too. So
Yeah, that does make sense. I'm still wrapping my brain around it, I have to say, but it's maybe something that I have to mull over for a couple of days or weeks to sort of make my own thoughts on it. But definitely an interesting one to keep in mind.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the beauty of this world. There's no one thought. There's a million thought. There's a million ways. Everyone wants to act like there's one way, and there's a million ways. As long as those ways are leading to the embetterment of our reality and our world, I think that's all you have to be concerned about, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also leads me to, based on what you've shared about psychedelics, it makes me think that the way they would work, and tell me if I'm generalizing too much, but it would be by suppressing either our internal blocks or our ego. So sort of releasing what we would have to release to experience our true selves. Because I think we cannot quite be in touch with our true selves often enough, because we have like all our traumas, all of our emotions, everything we think we need to be. So all of that gunk just basically clogs our way to seeing what we are, which is just pure love and bliss. So does it work this way, that it just blocks the ego, it blocks those parts of ourselves that we've accumulated throughout life?
I think you just described it very well, like very, very well. Yeah, I mean, it definitely with ego. I mean, if you've done 5-MeO-DMT, which is Bufa, it's toad venom, and it ejects you. You become nothing. Your ego dies, and you think you're dead. And within that moment, at least for me, that was the closest I was to my near-death experience. Now, it wasn't the same, but it was very much held in the divine. I even had this moment where an entity felt very holy, very divine. It felt very much like the one from my NDE was there with me, well on DMT. And so people cast stones at psychedelics, and it's not something to be played with lightly. The problem, anything can be abused. In America, marijuana is abused heavily. It's a sacred spiritual plant that can give you wonderful insights into life, but now everyone smokes it daily just to mask their sadness, mask the pain of living in a society that's failing everybody. It's overcome drinking. And that's a spiritual medicine plant. It shouldn't be taken more than once or twice a year. So anything can be abused. So you have to go in with the right meditations, the right diet, clear your body, clear your mind. Do these things with a reputable healer, a reputable guide. And that's still not to say someone might, most of the time people have beautiful experiences, but sometimes people can experience trauma just from the medicine, from fighting. Usually it's from fighting very hard against the nature of reality. I mean, it's terrifying. I think for me, having the near-death experience changed that a little, but psychedelics can be very terrifying. There are bad trips. And so I never say just go do psychedelics. There are so many YouTube people out there just being like, do it, it'll fix you. Now you got to be very careful about what you get into in this world. But if you do it spiritually, it can be a huge aid in healing. I know you talked about trauma. I had some, very deep childhood trauma from abuse. And even after the near death, even after sort of building myself back up, part of what psychedelics healed for me was sort of that missing. I was trying to say it. I was like, something's missing. I'd lay in bed at night and I'd be like, I don't know if it's a smell, a touch, a feel. I was like, something's missing from me. And I knew it was from this abuse when I was a kid. And psychedelics for me healed that. And so, yeah, it's hard to describe. An actual experience on psychedelics can be bliss, it can be godlike, and it can be terrifying. It can be a very bad trip. And even in those very bad trips, if people don't have, they can still come back with gains from that, with insights into their life. So I never want to be one to recommend psychedelics. I just say that they worked for me. But yeah, how you described it is very much, yeah, you see the world without your ego, and it just sort of allows you to understand the nature of reality, and the nature of our purpose here, which is, right, like what you said, it's just all about building conscious vibration and building love, and doing our part, doing our ant part in our colony to make our reality better. I mean, it's really your purpose here. So
you mentioned healing the trauma left by abuse through psychedelics, and it got me really curious to how you would heal via a psychedelic protocol. Is it just like, for instance, a medicine would work that you have a headache, you take an ibuprofen, and then boom, it's gone? Does it work in a similar way, or do those feelings then bubble up, and do you still need to go in with almost like a therapy lens and sort of try to understand what's happening and heal those feelings so that you sort of come back to your healed self?
I think there's a little bit of both. I think just the medicine itself does an extraordinary amount of healing, but it's always good to have therapy afterwards. And if it's in the practitioner, even better. I've done that for people in the past. I don't do that anymore, but I did that in the past for people. And immediately after a medicine journey, you can talk through it all, and a lot of things come out. You'll get a lot of sobbing, a lot of deeply personal things. But the medicine itself is very much the healer overall. I mean, they're using it now. They're using psilocybin now, and that's mushrooms, on post-traumatic stress, veterans who come back, and it's one of the biggest things that's healing them. It's allowing them to really heal. I mean, it changes your brain, it rebuilds neurons, and perhaps it just, things that are damaged from trauma are allowed to fire properly again up in your brain. Hard to describe the actual mechanism in it. I don't think you can. I know that the experience itself is often very holy. It's very much in touch with the divine. It's just filled with love, and love for everybody. And like I said, it's so often, I've had bad trips. Everyone's had bad trips, and that's not a pleasant experience. But it's those bad trips usually accompany a mindset of fear, is what I've always found going in a bad setting. You're not you're not with the proper guide. You're not in nature. So it's a wrong situation to do it. Your mind's not correct. Your diet's not correct. Usually when you meditate heavily and are in such a peaceful, blissful place, going in, and maybe you fasted going in, your experience is usually pretty positive. And yeah, I've definitely felt like I've met and communed with divine beings and entities many times on psychedelics. And so yeah, it's the ego being put aside, and it's very much the idea that right behind this curtain is this. It's not the people who don't know like to say, that's just a drug, you're just a druggie. And you're just like, when you've done it, when you know that, when you've touched this world, you just don't understand. And love for you, but it's not cocaine. It's not meth. It's not fentanyl. It's just, you don't want to do it again anytime soon. And it transforms you, for most people, lifelong. Most people, they find that they can do one heroic journey on psilocybin, magic mushrooms. They will never need to do it again, and they will find healing for the rest of their life.
Wow.
I mean, they have, psilocybin is now, and this, I'm sketchy on this because I don't like when pharmaceuticals, especially in America, it's a devastating power, and they're in phase 3 trials on psilocybin all over the place. They're like talking about replacing old school antidepressants with psilocybin, which I fully agree is better. But I just, pharmaceutical industry is you want to talk about an evil power, that's one of them. So yeah, so I don't like the fact that they're going full steam. It doesn't need to be a pill someone pops, and that's what they're going to try to make it. They're going to try to make you, you're taking your vitamin B with your psilocybin every morning for a little micro dose to numb yourself, and they're going to remove the spirituality from it, and it's the spirituality that makes it powerful. It's the intention that makes it powerful when you use a psychedelic. If you're just using it as a party drug, it's just going to be a party drug. I mean, the medicine is intelligent. It's an intelligent medicine. They know now that like these plants communicate underground. Trees, plants, everything. Their web of, I forget the cilia or whatever they call it. It's just like what I was talking about with consciousness above ground. And they're communicating. So if a mother tree has a young one that's thirsty, it can divert water over to it. I mean, and so this is all just, it's brilliant, intelligent medicine that's meant to heal us, that's meant to really heal the world. But you got to utilize it properly, and it has to remain spiritual. Not just another thing that our government's just like, here you go, this is just, don't believe in anything. Bye. Here's your, psilocybin to make it through the day. Yeah. So those are my feelings on that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think as long as you productize something that is useful, then the question becomes, how do we get people to need it every day, right? Because just needing it once in a lifetime or once a year won't do wonders for a bottom line. So how do we get you to take 3 a day, ideally? How do we create that need in you to
well, do and that? That's going to be the interesting thing, because I have microdosed psilocybin as well at time, and it's very beneficial. But eventually you don't need to do it. I mean, I have no need to. I kind of, going through a tough period about 5-6 years ago, I was microdosing, and it instantly, within weeks, I was back to normal. No pharmaceuticals, no anything.
It almost sounds like what's happening with sugar, isn't it? And it's just like in everything nowadays, and it's because it has so much addictive properties.
Yeah, and what they find out that like 50 years ago, they paid off the scientists on the study for the sugar industry and gave them like $50,000 each to say it wasn't bad for you and to divert it over to, forget what they did, but yeah, they've known forever how poisonous it is, and it's throw it in everything. Yeah, that gets back to sort of my whole purpose from these experiences. We can only change what we do first. And so you can change the world by changing what you consume, by what you buy, by what you allow your eyes to see. Some of it's forced down our throat regardless, but that's our power. And our power is to remember that we are the operant eye of God. We are the operant eye of the universe, and we hold great power. And I have to say that it's like the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was making us forget that we aren't the eye of God. And everyone's forgotten their power. They've forgotten who they are. But I feel like people are going to remember. It's always darkest before the dawn. There's like an old Chinese proverb that talks about how it will, there is no hope before the next age of enlightenment. And we can only see, we're only alive 100 years if we live a good life. We just don't have the capacity in our brains to really see past, too far down the road. And so, just make it your purpose, to live a good life, to avoid their capture, to put your focus, your time, your energy, and your money on what matters and on positive things, and that'll catch on, and eventually it'll hurt. In a very real way, that mindset eventually hurts pocketbooks of corporations, and they have to change, they have to adjust, and they do, because the way they've been screwing you one way suddenly no longer works. So it's big things happen all the time. Miracles happen all the time. It's all really, just our little ant part to do our best to fix ourselves, and then in turn get out in the world and help others. And that's what we can do. That's what my near-death experience taught me. That's what my psychedelic journeys have taught me. It's just be your best self. make man and woman and animal and plant, give it the best life it can, and do your best to make this existence a good one.
Amazing. So I also want to talk about some of the experiences you've had through meditation, because I know that you sometimes go into very deep meditation and then I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you're encountering different beings and having similar, experiences with the divine. So could you tell me more about that and maybe share one or two of those experiences with us?
Yeah. My dad taught me meditation way back in the day. So even before my near-death experience, I knew about meditation, and that was one of the things that really helped channel the energy that was unleashed in me somewhat afterwards. I always felt most at home in meditation, most calm, connected to everything, to God, the universe, and just the energy. And but I've done trance meditation work in my life, and so it's a powerful energy to tap into, and oftentimes people want to know the secrets of meditation. Well, there are various meditations, and one form of meditation is just going on a long walk without headphones on and just being in the world. That's very meditative, calming and getting an even breath. It's meditation is focusing on your breath. But you can also use binary beats and do different trance meditations. And there was just one point in my life, for instance, where I was using this one binary beat on YouTube, and it did allow me to get into just a very much psychedelic mind field. And it became so strong that there was a time where, I feel like I had allowed some kind of energy to attach onto me. And even during waking hours, I would, you could kind of see purple orbs floating like through the room and stuff like that. And I started having sort of frozen night terrors for a while. And this was all right around the time, like within the time I was doing this sort of extreme. I still do trance meditations, but I feel like I do them safer, if that makes any sense. This was sort of music and beats and rhythms are very powerful, and they're if you know anything about like hemisync, the CIA developed beats to really like focus brain waves back in the day and like utilize thought power, and like so it's something that is fairly well known, and they can be used to manipulate too. For instance, a lot of like music and commercials are recorded at a certain wave that actually makes you sort of feel bad about yourself. You can look at it, so it's very much like there's all this power behind actual energy waves going into our body. I've used meditation and I still do frequently, and it's such a powerful. You can experience almost as much on a good trance meditation as you can with a psychedelic. I wouldn't say the instant healing comes from that, but it's a repetition, a practice. But you have to be a little careful if you're going into deep trance meditations. It's a weird existence, and we don't have full grasp of every reality or dimension. But there's definitely was, if that felt like a negative energy that came with me out of that one that you had to shed. And funny enough, I think I talked about this one other time, is the birth of my daughter. My first daughter came and it went away and never came back. And it was very strange, the birth of my daughter, and I never had another night terror. And so that was a very interesting thing. So I'm a little more careful with how I utilize meditation now, because maybe it's from the near-death experience, maybe it's from that energy that I've always had in me, but that time was the only time I ever had something where it felt like it didn't feel like a positive being that was there. And so thank God it's gone, I try to make sure, try to be more judicious with how I utilize that now, because I do feel like I have a ability to channel things if I'm not careful. Yeah.
Right. So it feels like, because I think the way I think of it is when the veil drops a bit or a lot in the case of near-death experiences or awakenings, then you're a bit more open to energies and to receiving different things. So then I think for things that want to come in or messages that need to be sent, you would be more open to receiving than somebody, let's say, that wouldn't have had the awakening or the NDE. Is that how you see it as well?
I mean, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, I've always had that as I've grown older. Now, that was the thing that just came with age and growing older and maybe cleaning up. Was I always had the ability to even attract a certain person to me in my younger life that no longer shows up in this life, and now more of a person, more of a using type person, more almost maybe sociopathic. In my younger years, I was always attracting that type of person to my energy, and since I've really done the work for healing, those people just don't really show up in my sphere anymore. It's very interesting. I would say, yeah, I mean, so I would agree with you on that. I haven't talked about that too much, but yeah, definitely something that I would notice before is the type of people I would attract to me. Felt a little different from what they do now, but that could just be the realm of the things I was messing with too. So, You
mentioned this energy went away when your daughter was born. So
yeah.
It wasn't anything that you did to sort of get rid of it.
No, I mean, not in this case. No. I mean, I stopped practicing that, and I think I stopped feeding it like some kind of power. Yeah, I mean, I will say that was the only time something felt a little dark. Yeah, and you were able to recognize it as not. It was a little unsettling, whatever that was. And yeah, the birth of my daughter, it was like an angel came back and said, boom, you're gone. See you later. That's how it felt. I mean, it wasn't too much omnipresent on my mind, but I was just like, oh, that never happened again, months later while you're in the exhaustion of changing diapers and all that. So, yeah, so.
Yeah, that worked out quite nicely.
Yeah, it did. It was interesting. So it's beautiful. Beautiful daughter, now a beautiful son as well. So yeah, I mean, a lot of work. And that's, everyone wants a quick fix. They want to take a pill, or they want to watch one thing that like fixes their life. And there's no quick fix in this world. You just have to do the legwork, and that becomes your journey. That's what gives you the fulfillment. It gives me so much strength, just like being deeper into this journey of living a clean life now, being with my positive energy, and you don't want to hand that over for anything. You don't want to, yeah, it's just, that's the journey, and you got to do the work to get there. But I promise you, if you're listening to this and you're down, that's what gives you the purpose. And I say this because so many people out there are so much worse off than you know what I mean? There's like the person who can't get off the couch. They're just stuck. And part of my message and my mission is to give people like simple things you can actually do to get going. And if you just are stuck and like you're shut in your house and you're depressed, and the first thing you can do is just get out to the grass, just get your feet in the earth and ground yourself to the earth. There's energy frequencies in that earth, and within a half an hour you can calm your body and your mind down and sit in the sun, just soak in the sun, in the warmth of the sun if you can, and get your feet in the grass, and then walk. Just move your body. Just the act of moving your body will start to heal. And it's all really nature. Nature's trying to heal you. I mean, really, don't get off a treadmill. I mean, treadmills are fine if you don't have any other choice, but get into a park. I mean, if you can, do a camp out somewhere. Just be in nature, and you will feel so much better. And then volunteer, like do these things so you can move your body and try to cut out the junk food and feed yourself right. But then volunteer. It's like the best life hack for instantly feeling good about yourself. You will feel better about yourself the same day after you volunteer, and you help people. So it's like this magical double, working that can fix the world and help you heal yourself. So these are like teeny little things that you can do, and everyone wants to, you're afraid of making that step. But if you just start saying yes to those things, and your life's going to change really fast within like a few months. And then within a year, you might not even recognize the person you were. I mean, you've got work to do on this earth to make it a better place. And you can not just allow yourself to sit in fear and depression and crippling. I mean, some people have it really bad, and I get that. And then there's a time for acute help and medicine. And absolutely, you need to take that. But you've got a purpose, and this place is love. And you've got to just, if you can't even get out of the house, just get into a yard, get into a park, and get your feet in the grass and start there. That's what I'd say.
I love that. And that's such a beautiful advice to end on. So if people want to reach out to you, are you open to that? And if so, how can they find you?
I would say mostly find me on YouTube at Holden Lee -333. I check comments. I talk to people through comments. I've had people reach out to me in the past through email, and as my channel's growing, that is starting to get very hard to do, even though I have several good friends I've made from it. But I'm also raising 2 kids and, writing and so I would say the best place for now is to reach out on YouTube, and I like to chat with people there and see where that can go from there for reaching out and stuff like that.